Bam. We are live. It is a good day to wake up as John Owning because the Cowboys did the last 12, maybe 12 to 16 hours have been like the most active period for the Cowboys front office in maybe a year at least. So they make a trade yesterday afternoon. We'll get to that here in a little bit. We want to start with, we talked about this guy whenever he came to Oxnard for the workout, all that kind of stuff. We've been talking about Carl Lawson, on Twitter and in the DMs and stuff like that for years. And here we are, John. The reports come out this morning that the Dallas Cowboys are going to be signing Carl Lawson, veteran defensive end, started his career with the Cincinnati Bengals, played really well there, then went to the Jets, had some injury trouble there that kind of kept him off the field, but was effective when he was on the field. And now he, much to the excitement of my partner here, is going to put a star on his helmet, and he's going to play the 2024 season for the Dallas Cowboys. John, tell me about your morning this morning as you woke up to this news.
Ooh-wee, man. I wish I could wake up every Thursday like this. This was fantastic.
Yeah.
It was funny. I was just waking up to use the bathroom at like 5 a.m., checked my phone as I was going to the bathroom, and boom, just mentions, DMs out the wazoo, tons of things. I didn't see like the content of anything. I just saw that I had a boatload of mentions and DMs and stuff. So, first thing that crosses my mind is like, oh no, what happened to D-Law? What happened to DeMarcus Lawrence? The only reason everybody would be mentioning this is if something happened to my guy. Oh no. And then luckily when I got on, I logged on to Twitter right then, and the first thing I saw were Carl Lawson in capital letters, and I was like, let's go.
He's been intolerable all morning, KJ, all morning.
Oh, dude, it was honestly, it was tough for me to go to sleep. Even as I went back into bed, I was like, I nudged my wife. I go, guess what? She goes, what? So, Cowboys got Carl Lawson. She literally woke up and went, are you serious? I was like, damn right. She's like, oh, congrats. That's great. And I was like, I know.
Now let me go back to sleep.
I didn't. I just laid there. And stared at the ceiling and just fantasized about seeing Carl Lawson with a star on his helmet. But I really think this is an exciting move. I think this is something that should have happened a couple of weeks ago, but I think the Cowboys were looking at cheaper options with Tony and AQM, now Qadim Muhammad, and they wanted to see if those younger guys could work out for them on the cheap because, Carl Lawson, he's more of a veteran. He doesn't need training camp as much. He's honestly throughout the NFL, everybody knows him for his work ethic, for the work he puts in the offseason. So they had no worries about him, staying in shape, being in physical shape, being ready to play. So I think they just were trying to save a few dollars and see if, they can do it the budget way. But once they found out, Shaka Tony got the groin injury, I'm surprised he didn't get whiplash on his neck from all the face masks
he
had to deal with. And, AQM, he's made some plays, but he hasn't done anything to inspire you to the fact that he's going to be able to replace any of the production you lost from Sam Williams or Dante Fowler. And that's exactly what Carl Lawson can do. I think particularly he's more of the Dante Fowler kind of replacement as the guy who can be a pass rush specialist who you want to come in pass rush situations and be efficient and be able to create pressure, opposite of Micah Parsons. And I think that's exactly what Carl Lawson can do. He's a little bit of a shorter edge, but he's a dynamo. He has a lot of power built in that short little package he has. As a pass rusher, he wins with a strong get off. He can win inside, outside, or through offensive tackles. When he's running high side, he likes to use a speed rip, a really powerful rip that he uses to help him corner because he's not the most flexible athlete, but he uses really good and really particular footwork to be able to cut those corners and be able to flatten to the quarterback once he gets to a quarterback to his tackle's edge. He does that really well. And when he's not using a rip, his kind of counter instead of using a rip is the cross chop. He has an effective cross chop. He does it a little bit differently than DeMarcus Lawrence. You don't see as much of the inside than outside leap. He's much more of a straight line kind of. He'll use it straight line and then just use it to kind of use it as a chop to chop down and then corner. So it's a little bit different than the way D-Law uses it, but it's still effective. I wouldn't say it's his best move, but it's definitely something that he has in his tool bag. It's something that he's won a lot with before. I mean, go watch the Miami Dolphins game in 2023, and you'll see he has 3 or 4 pressures with the cross chop that way. And then outside of that, he can win with a bull rush. He's not the type of guy that's going to win with extension on bull rush. He's the kind of guy that throws his helmet right underneath an offensive tackle's chin, uses that to elevate their pad level, and then he'll run his feet with that leverage advantage as they're kind of getting lifted up and put on their toes, and that allows him to walk offensive tackles back. And he kind of uses that as his jab. He'll kind of go power, and then he'll look to go speed, or he'll look to go what I think is the strongest move that he has and the thing that his pass rush repertoire is really built on, and that's the long arm. And if you look at his as his measurements and his stature, you might think it's kind of weird that a guy with sub 32-inch arms has a really effective long arm, but that just shows you how important it is with timing, placement, and the ability to knife your body so that you extend that single long arm so that he's still out. I mean, I have tons of clips and tons of pictures of where you see him outreaching offensive tackles that have 35-inch arms, and that's because he's knifing his body, making his one arm as long as possible. And when an offensive tackle is square, there's only so long as their arms can reach. So he's really a master of knowing those little placements, those little angles, those types of things. That's really where he thrives as a pass rusher, especially now. And he uses that long arm. He can use it to win high side, which is outside, and he uses it with the long arm. Then he'll chop the outside arm in corner. He can also win inside with it, where he long arms, and then as the offensive tackle's shuffling outside, he throws them by with that long arm, the long arm shot put. And then he can do the traditional long arm bull rush, where if he feels them soft setting his long arm, he could just press it through, walk the guy back to the quarterback, and then whichever way the quarterback goes, he'll release and try to get the sack. So I think this is a guy with a really impressive pass rush repertoire. He has the get off. He has the power. He can use speed. I think the only thing that's important is the fact coming off back injuries. We know how terrifying really back injuries are for line of scrimmage players. So as long as he's back in his 2022 physical form that he was with his first season with the Jets, that's somebody who can make a giant impact for the Cowboys defense, especially opposite Micah Parsons. I know we brought it up when Carl Lawson was here working out, but when you have a speed rusher like Micah Parsons on one side, you want to be able to complement with a guy who can rush with power on the other side. And Carl Lawson brings that ability to the Cowboys on the edge. So I think that's really important. And I think that's really exciting, especially in the Mike Zimmer defense. And everybody knows, I mean, not everybody knows, but he does have a lot of connections to the Zimmer defense. He did not play for Zimmer with the Cincinnati Bengals, but he played with Paul Gunther for, I think, 2 or 3 of those seasons. So they are very aware of his skill set. They are very aware of his work ethic, the things he does well, the things he doesn't do well. So I know they already have a very good idea of how he's going to fit into the scheme, and I'm very excited.
No notes. You covered it all. Let's cut the show from here. No, so yeah, you nailed it. You know this player as well or better than just about anybody in this space. So I am excited for you, but B, excited for the folks that are watching this to be able to get this level of analysis on a free agent signing done on August the 15th. And you talked a little bit about what it means for the Cowboys, in terms of the complement to Micah Parsons, the role that he can kind of fill, and the thing I like to talk about is the trickle down effects of something like this, right? So they were kind of counting on the way the roster had kind of settled with Sam Williams being out, is that if DeMarcus Lawrence was going to have any opportunity to move inside and rush on inside rushers, or if Micah Parsons was going to move around at all, which is like centric to the entire defensive plan for the Cowboys, is they were going to have to trust Marshawn Kneeland in a huge ways to generate pressure. And he's played better, I think, than you could expect most second-round rookie defensive ends to come in and play. But one of the things that we know, and I did this work all the way back in 2016 or 2017, and there's been nothing to change this that's happened. You can almost never count on like actual on-field box score production from rookie pass rushers, especially guys taken outside the top 10 or 12 picks. Like you get those guys up high, sometimes they'll hit Micah Parsons hits real big, Myles Garrett hits real big real early in the career. But most of the time, if they're not taken in that top 10 or 12, you get almost nothing out of them rookie year production-wise. Mm-hmm. So they were going to be counting on Marshawn Kneeland in a way that, from a production standpoint, was going to be tough to get what they needed out of him. What this does is this gives the Cowboys a second, really a third edge in pass rush situations. It allows Marshawn Kneeland to still eat some of those run snaps that he's probably going to be pretty good at, and give Micah Parsons some snaps off on early downs where he's not getting beaten up quite so much. Combine the fact that Chauncey Golson has moved outside quite a bit more, all those sorts of things. It allows that run defense to come together a little bit with those guys while giving yourself a pass rush specialist to come in on those third down situations, come in those 2-minute situations, who can actually give tackles trouble when they get one-on-ones. Because that's what these other rushers are going to have to be able to do. That's what Osa is going to have to be able to do. That's what now Carl Lawson is going to have to do. And DeMarcus Lawrence and Chauncey Golson when he's inside rushing, and all these guys, they're going to have to be able to win one-on-one in these big situations, these high leverage situations, because the protection is going to be turned to wherever Micah's at to try to keep Micah from being the guy that blows the game up. So you got to have these other guys who can win in these situations. With that, with Carl Lawson in play, now you have a guy you can put on the edge opposite Micah Parsons with Tank Lawrence inside and Oso Odighizuwa, the other tackle. And now you've got a 4 that can get after it if you just want to line up and go and rush 4. Or if you want to move Tank and Micah around, you put Carl on one side, you put Marshawn Kneeland or somebody else on the edge on the other side. And now you've got the 2 chess pieces to move around, and they still have to know, and you still have a guy who can win one-on-one on the edge. Whereas if you were to do that now and just have like Marshawn Kneeland and AQM or Shaka Toney, or, name your back end of the depth chart defensive end for the Cowboys right now on that other end, they're just throwing their tackles out there on islands against those guys and knowing they're going to win, condensing the protection, bringing the running back into protection and playing 4-on-3 or 4-on-2 on the inside against Tank and Micah, and they're going to probably get that blocked up. So it just changes all that stuff. And then what it also does is it allows you in some situations to get Osa Odighizuwa off the field, because they don't have another 3 technique on the roster. The Junior Fehoko project has they've kind of declared that 3 technique project to be a loss, and they've put him back out on the edge. Who knows what that means for his roster spot? Come a few weeks from now when we do cut downs. Chauncey Golson's playing more on the edge, but he can move inside to rush, but he's not. You don't really want to play inside against the run. They traded for another nose tackle, so they've got a little bit of like actual real life nose tackle play between Mozzie and Jordan Phillips, but they don't have that 3 technique depth. So this is a way to add some veteran edge depth, and then that gives you a lot of flexibility in what you do at that defensive tackle spot with Tank, with Micah, with Chauncey Golson, with Junior Fehoko. Like, all of these guys get the opportunity now to rush against some guards and do it in more one-on-one situations than they would have otherwise.
Yeah, it gives the team just a ton more versatility with their rush packages. Mm-hmm. You mentioned all the little different combinations they can use to get 4 definitive pass rushers on the field at the same time. And that's something, on third down, when you have Zimmer, we talk about it all the time, and I can't wait till you guys actually see it play out on the football field. But Zimmer's going to get wild with his coverage combinations and the things he's doing in the back 7. And if you can combine that with 4 definitive rushers who can get upfield and generate pressure, that's going to make life extremely difficult on opposing offenses in those high leverage situations and 2-minute drills. These situations that the Cowboys have really kind of struggled in for the last, for honestly, as long as I can honestly remember. is they've really struggled in those late game 2-minute situations, third down must pass. You know, if Micah's not making a play or D-Law's not making a play, it's like no one's making a play. So that gives you another way to have more confidence in the defense, as our guy Dustin Roberts said. I think that's obviously true. And another, I think, little small thing that a lot of people aren't going to mention, but I think it will have an impact going forward on the future of the Cowboys is I think Marshawn Kneeling can learn a lot from Carl Lawson. You know, he's a lot longer than Carl Lawson, but since Kneeland, whatever we talked about, his primary pass rush move is that long arm. And there's nobody better to learn the details, the nuances of timing and placement on long arms than Carl Lawson. And if he can kind of take those lessons and that tutelage from Carl Lawson and use that to make his long arm even more effective, that's something that, you know, in year 2, 3, 4, way after Carl Lawson is gone, we can see the positive effects just keep going after that for Kneeland's pass rush ability. So I like it not only for what it does on the field, but what it possibly can help, you know, someone like Marshawn Kneeland, who's shown a propensity to want to learn, to want to develop. He's talked about, you know, the quote today with Micah Parsons about how they're going to watch film on Cameron Jordan together so that he can help him improve, you know, and I think that's a similar thing that he can do with Carl Lawson. So I'm just excited for it on different facets. And then the only thing that gives me any pause is just the injuries. You know, he's had a couple torn ACLs in his career. He had the torn Achilles. He had the back injury. But as long as he can get back to his post Achilles self, that 2022 Carl Lawson, you know, that is a guy, like I said before, he can make a serious and tangible impact on the Cowboys this year. He can replace that Dante Fowler pass rush production. He can help, you know, ease the pain of losing a guy like Sam Williams. He can help make, you know, we don't talk about it much either, but, you know, Micah Parsons and D-Law got to come off the field too. They're not playing 100% snaps. They're not Max Crosbying it out there. So you need to have reserved rushers that you can trust to win when, you know, Micah Parsons isn't in, when D-Law isn't in. And Carl Lawson is a guy who has shown that when healthy in his career, he can be a guy to win those one-on-one matchups. Every year that he's gotten over 300 pass rush reps, he's posted at least 50 pressures and over a 14.5% win rate. So that is very exciting. That is something that the Cowboys need. And like I said, this is a good move for the Cowboys. We've been, you know, critiquing the front office for most of the offseason, as justifiably as they should have been, but I like this move.
Yes, absolutely. I think that plus, you know, we'll move to the trade that they made last night, which essentially they traded this bag of trail mix that I've got right here. They threw a bag of trail mix to Buffalo, and Buffalo sent back a nose tackle. And we'll talk about Jordan Phillips. You've got a great evaluation and a great take on Jordan, but the big picture take is that they added in a period of 10 hours 2 professional defensive linemen, like professional, capable defensive linemen. Jordan Phillips specifically is not a guy who comes in and changes your defense, right? He's not one of those nose tackles, right? You don't get those guys for trading a 7th round pick to a 5th round pick, right? Or a 6th round pick. But you can get a real life, like, hey, he can come in and almost be an innings eater in a way that he just eats some blocks, let linebackers run. You know, the linebackers have been very good in Buffalo for a long time. And they've gone through several of them, and they've had some guys who weren't great before they got there be really good there, and they've had some guys who weren't very good after they were there, who were good when they were. And so he's the kind of guy who can come in and just be – we talked about how difficult the weight gain journey and all that stuff was going to be for Mazi. This is a guy that can kind of eat some of that Mazi, some of that work that we were hopeful that Mazi would be able to take on this year, but we knew was going to be a rough journey for him to get to that, you know, 65, 70% snap share as a nose tackle in the first year coming off the shoulder with the weight loss stuff, all that other kind of stuff. So it's just a really good move that costs you nothing and gets you a real life professional interior defensive lineman, which this team had like 1.5 of before this move.
Yeah, this is one of those moves that, is our favorite kind of move, low risk, high reward. I think it's interesting. He played with the Bills last year, but I will note that he got signed by the Giants and traded by the Giants this year. Which is funny.
You're right.
He got signed in the offseason by the Giants, then traded by them. And I'll go with the good. There's the, the upside, the positive side, and then there's also some negatives that come with it. But I think that positives outweigh the negatives for sure. On the positive side, he's a giant nose tackle. He's a giant, 320 plus. I think he's what, like 6'4", 6'5".
Let's see what PFRF Pro Football Reference has him at. Do you guys have height and weight on PFF?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, let's look there because there are guys.
But they're what the teams say, so you know how accurate those are.
Yeah.
AKA not very accurate. But and honestly, for how big he is, he's very nimble. He's a guy who moves really well. He has pretty decent range for a nose tackle. He played actually in Buffalo a ton of 3 technique. They used him in pass rush situations. He was the defensive tackle, the nose tackle. A lot of times they would bring on in pass rush situations, in 2-minute, on third down situations. I think he had a double-digit sack year 3 or 4 years ago when he made the Pro Bowl. 6'6".
6'6", 341 is what we have him on from Pro Football Focus.
He's a giant, and he's nimble, and he rushes the passer adequately well, and he has the size that he can clog running lanes. On the negative side, I would say if you look at the New York Giants defensive tackle depth, it's almost as bad behind Dexter Lawrence as what the Cowboys have behind Mozzie Smith. So the fact that he was running with the third team defense in Giants camp is not exactly the best indicator. But I will say the Giants play a different style defense than what Mike Zimmer employs.
Yep.
From everything you heard from the Giants this offseason, they are going to play a much more upfield defense. And while we've talked about ad nauseum about the Invader Zim defense, how he's going to be more building a wall up front, and I think that plays better to a guy of Jordan Phillips' size. And another kind of issue that he has is he's very undisciplined from a gap perspective against the run. He jumps out of his gap a lot. You'll see him get ejected out of his gap quite a bit, especially as his conditioning wanes. The conditioning police are going to hate him. The guys who are watching Mozzie Smith huffing and puffing, Jordan Phillips is going to make you very upset because that guy's cardio is ungood to say the least.
It's not possible to be 341 and have good cardio. It's just not not when you're because it's not lean weight. Like I don't care. Jordan Phillips is 6'6". Like I think Shaq weighs like 315 or something like that, and he's 7 or 8 inches taller than what Jordan Phillips is, and he weighs 20 pounds less, and like he's on the bigger side of decent weight. So like you just can't be under 7 foot and over 320 something pounds and have good weight. Like you got to carry some bad weight to do that. And it's pretty obvious when you see these guys retire and lose like 100 pounds in 6 months, and all of a sudden they can walk and move and their feet don't hurt and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. And he's a guy that he flashes, though. He'll have a few plays a game where he makes big plays, gets in the backfield, creates disruption, does these things that are going to open your eyes. But he'll also have those plays where his pad level swells and he gets, ejected out of his gap. Watch the New England Patriots game from last year. It was honestly an awful, awful performance from him. It was the kind of thing that we saw from Carl Davis last year as a guy who's big for no reason, getting pushed around. But then you see other games like the Cowboys game, he does do a little bit better. He does create that disruption. He does do a little bit better of holding up against those double teams, even though there was a couple of plays where he got moved. But you're going to have to take the good with the bad with him. I think if he plays on a snap count, 10 to 15 to at the high side, 20 snaps a game, I think that's good enough to where he can, rev his engines, keep them revving at a high level and not really experience those loafing snaps that have kind of come through on his tape, especially in Buffalo a lot. But he's definitively better than any nose tackle the Cowboys had behind Mozzie Smith. He gives you more size. He kind of is a much better Carl Davis, in my opinion. So I think,
which is exactly what you wanted, right? That's exactly what you needed. You needed to upgrade that guy. And if you think about, okay, if you give Jordan Phillips 15 to 18 snaps a game, you give Mozzie Smith 15 to 18 snaps a game, maybe 3 or 4 of those overlap because of goal line, short yardage type situations where they're both in there. Other than that, that's 30-ish, 30 to 35 nose tackle, like true, like big fat guy nose tackle snaps a game. You probably don't need very many more than that. And so you're going to wind up with a lot of, there's a lot of other ways to construct it. We just spent 10 minutes talking about how we're going to have nothing but defensive ends and linebackers on the field in a bunch of these pass rush situations. So there's plenty of, I think with the Jordan Phillips addition, there's now plenty of nose tackle, like plenty of real true one technique / nose tackle snaps to be accounted for. At 2, and again, it's you run Jordan Phillips out there for a first down and a second down, and then it's 3rd down and 7, and unless they're in hurry up, he's running off the field anyway. And then when the nose tackle runs back off, you just run Mozzie Smith back out there, and they never have to play more than 2, 3, 4 snaps in a row, and they should be able to, like you said, just rev their engine over and over and over, and just keep being out there playing hard. Never get that real like you talk about, never get to that stage where they don't have it in them to play hard, and continue to just eat those blocks up and let these linebackers run and make plays.
Yeah, I think the best thing about these 2 moves is that it improved the depth of the 2 positions really on defense that we're most worried about from a depth perspective. When we looked at the depth, coming into today before the trade and before the Carl Lawson signing, it was really worrisome, behind DeMarcus Lawrence and Marshawn Nealon, there's really nothing really there at defensive end, especially at defensive tackle behind Mozzie and Osa. There was zero. There was nothing. It was a ghost town out there, like the type of ghost town that if they have to see the field on the regular season, the opposing offensive lines are going to be licking their chops. They're going to be, they're going to be running duo, creating those 2 double teams and creating insane displacement. They're going to be all the issues that we were worried about coming into this year about the linebackers, not having enough time to flow to the ball because they're getting immediately encumbered by blocks and stuff. And that was going to be the issue again anytime, someone like Mozzie wasn't on the field, or, there's going to be plays where Mozzie and Osa are both not on the field, where you have both reserve defensive tackles in, and that's a scary situation before these moves were made.
They had no real-life pro defensive tackles behind those guys. Now they have another one. And, he's not a high-end player anymore, was probably a higher-end player earlier in his career, like you said, had a double-digit sack season from inside, which is like it's so rare, it's ridiculous. There's 1 or 2 of those guys per season that are getting double-digit sacks from the inside, and most of the time it's Aaron Donald and Chris Jones. And so Donald is gone, so somebody else has to do it. But I don't think it's going to be Jordan Phillips in the year of our Lord 2024. But yeah, it just improves so much of the question marks that we had left about this defense, of just some stability. And every year there's this like 1 or 2 guys who are available on the free agent market in this training camp time. It used to be Jadeveon Clowney every year, would be out there, and you'd be like, well, if the pass rush doesn't develop, they can go out and sign Jadeveon Clowney and they'll be okay. And this year it was Carl Lawson. It was, hey, if the pass rush doesn't develop, if Marshawn Nealon is good but not as good as they need him to be, if Sam Williams isn't as good as you need him to be, or something happens, you get an injury, there's always Carl Lawson out there. And it feels like every year they never went and got that guy. And this year they had the same problems, and they went out and got the guy that is kind of the obvious, hey, go out and upgrade this position of need. And then they added onto it with a bag of trail mix for a big defensive tackle, which is exactly the kind of move that you need to be making at this point in the season. And then you're going to get 2 or 3 weeks from now, and somebody's 4th running back is going to be better than your primary backup. And you're going to go out and, trade, a half empty can of Coke Zero to somebody for a 4th running back, and they're going to give him to you, and he's going to get, 5 carries a game for you or something like that and be a contributor. So Dustin, I don't think this qualifies as all in.
No, I think this qualifies as they just put in their blind. Yes. They finally put on we've been waiting for them just to up their blind, and they finally put in their big blind.
Finally. They finally said, like, you know what?
We're in the game now. We're playing a hand.
They finally said there are some things about this team right now that aren't good enough. We can take those from really crappy to maybe just okay. Mm-hmm. And if you take that from really crappy to just okay, and then in Carl Lawson's case, maybe there's some upside beyond just okay, depending on the health. That can make a massive improvement in the overall performance of your defense if you just remove a couple of those really bad players. And one of the things you talked about is some of these offensive linemen are going to look at these reserve defensive lines, and they're just going to say, let's just line up and run duo right at these guys and move them. I don't think it's a coincidence that right before this Jordan Phillips trade, they had 2 inter-squad practices and a preseason game against the Rams that added like 900 pounds of interior offensive line beef in the offseason and are like majoring in duo last year and this year. So I don't think it's a coincidence that happened, and the timing of this is that they kind of realized, all right, what we have is not good enough for what we're going to face in the NFL in 2024. We got to go out and we have to upgrade with some margin of improvement, and then hopefully that helps give ourselves a higher floor on defense than what we would have had.
I agree, but I do think if I would still love for them to make a similar move at 3 technique. I would love to get someone in here that can spell Osa so that he doesn't have to play 40 plus snaps a game. If we can stay into that 30 to 35 range, get a 3 technique that can play 10 to 15 to 20 snaps, maybe, that would, I think, be a big win for the defense and help solidify that defensive line depth going into the season. I think that would be the perfect move. Maybe that's something they always talk about, how they're going to be hitting the waiver wire at the end. And maybe that's something that they're going to do. They're going to look at these teams that have a little bit better defensive tackle depth, a little bit better 3 technique depth. Maybe they're going to be looking for every year. There's those defensive linemen that aren't bad players. They're just bad scheme fits for the team that they're on. And maybe they're going to look to try to grab one of those guys. Maybe they'll do a trade, so they don't have to fight for them in the waiver wire claims, or they just go in for a claim on somebody. But I would love to see them make a similar move to the ones they just made, but at 3 technique. And then I would feel really, really happy with this defense going into the regular season.
Yes, absolutely. The one spot that you look at on the 2 deep on defense at this point and kind of say, there's a pretty significant question there, is now the 3 technique, right? The outside corners, I feel pretty darn good about Trayvon Diggs, Deron Bland, the way Kalen Carson has been playing in camp. Like, that's a pretty darn good 3 deep there at outside corner. Inside, you've got Jordan Lewis, who's had an unbelievable camp and has a long track record of being a pretty good enough, especially when you don't have him ISO'd in man coverage all day, running all over the field chasing these guys. Pretty good slot corner. Israel Mukuamu can do the job inside too. He's taking some reps outside. You feel really good about the cornerback group. They're 4, maybe 5 deep at safety on guys you feel really good about. Linebacker, we're talking about, we're talking about who's getting squeezed out between, DeMarvion Overshown and Damone Clark. And meanwhile, they have a 4th round pick that they just made that they feel really good about, that they're about to plug in. Or no, he was a 3rd round pick. He was the other 3rd round pick besides Cooper Beebe. They have a 3rd round pick that they just drafted that the defensive coordinator likes a lot, that is going to play linebacker. So we just talked about the edges and all that kind of stuff. The one spot left on that 2 deep is really the 3 technique that they like to be able to upgrade and get closer to real life sustainable NFL play from a backup player there that they just don't have right now. So now we're gonna move. We got some news earlier in the week that is well, Swanee, this is a great question. This is important. So this is, if the Cowboys pay for a specific player to get specific coaching from a person like Duke Manyweather, is the person who Swanee is referring to here, or any private coach like that, it's a violation of the salary cap. It's a benefit given to the player outside of the salary cap. It's not allowed by the CBA unless you're Tom Brady and you want to bring your private trainer in and give him an office and have the other players pay, have the organization pay. It's your business partner to come
whole
in.
thing with the Patriots is everybody talks about why did Tom Brady take below market on his contracts?
Yes, there's a lot there that we won't dive into in the next 25 minutes because we got real football to talk about. But no, they can't, but they can strongly encourage their players to go work with him. And, there is a good relationship between the offensive line coach for the Cowboys and Duke Manyweather. There is a long-standing relationship between players like Zach Martin and Duke Manyweather. Tyler Smith's relationship with Duke is obviously well stated. I think if you talk to Terrence Steele, he probably credits a significant percentage of his ability to elevate himself to the player he's become to working with Duke. There is a long-standing relationship there. And as Duke said, whenever the Cowboys drafted Tyler Guyton and they asked him about working with Tyler, Duke said, "What is understood does not have to be said." And so it's sort of become an understanding, and that I think there's a lot of what the Cowboys' ability to draft these offensive linemen and have them become playable players, like acceptable players, is the fact that they have such easy access day in and day out to Duke Manyweather. It literally
he's on the same property.
Yes, on the same
during
property.
The off season, they would literally go lift weights with the team, do that stuff, and then just walk 100 feet over and go work with Duke. And then guess what? When they're done with Duke, they can walk 100 feet back and go into meetings with the Cowboys,
and go eat and go, get their new, it is an unbelievably positive situation and arrangement. We'll say it that way for the Cowboys and Duke. It's very mutually beneficial. I will say it that way to those guys. And so, no, they can't pay for it, but they can. I would also not be shocked if Duke gets a very, very, very good deal on the real estate, on the lease and all that kind of stuff that he has, because the Cowboys do own this. I went into this on Twitter. The Cowboys own every piece of real estate at and around the Star except for the Ford Stadium, where the actual practice field is, and that is owned by the city of Frisco, and the Cowboys pay a lease to the city of Frisco to use it, and then they get to then charge the Frisco ISD and anybody else who holds events there. So the Cowboys lease it's a very complicated kind of business situation, but I would be shocked if Duke Manyweather does not get a wonderful arrangement on his leasing for his property over there at the Star. So we got some news early in the week, straight from the mouth of Mike McCarthy. Rarely do we get things, directly from the mouth of the man in charge of the football team, where he says, yeah, Cooper Beebe is going to start taking reps as the first team center. And so that started happening, a couple of days ago, went into the inter-squad practice with the Rams, got some reps with the ones there. Brock Hoffman, I think based on what you see on Training Camp Live, had maybe one of his worst practices of camp against the Rams in terms of, some missed snaps and some other kind of stuff going on. So it seems like there is some competition and some pressure for the offensive center one position that we didn't think was going to be there a week ago. But going into the game against the Rams, we kind of thought that job was wrapped up. And then, I don't know about you, I thought Cooper Beebe had a pretty darn good game against the Rams. And I think that kind of earned him that opportunity to take some of those snaps with the ones. And it seems like so far, he hasn't backed down from that opportunity. What's your take on the Cooper Beebe center one situation?
Yeah, it seems like the coaching staff was just waiting for Beebe to show, the development that would put him on a trajectory to be able to pass Hoffman. Mm-hmm. Because to this point, Hoffman has flat out outplayed Beebe throughout most of training camp, and I think that is something that would be collaborated by anybody that went out mm-hmm. to see practices. But I think everybody understands that Cooper Beebe has a much higher ceiling than Brock Hoffman, and the offensive line as a whole has a much bigger ceiling, higher ceiling with Cooper Beebe as the center. I also think Cooper Beebe is a little bit better with the mental side stuff from what I hear. He picks up on the protections, pointing out the mic, those things. He's a little bit he's a little bit further in his development than Brock Hoffman is in those situations. Has a little bit higher of a football IQ, I would say. And that's something that I think was one of BB's biggest selling points coming out of college. I think, Duke Manyweather had many videos come out showing, Cooper Beebe's football intelligence and how that's going to be something that's going to allow him to play immediately in the NFL. And I think given how he performed against the Rams and the fact that, he wasn't any worse than Brock Hoffman was in that game. And just knowing that, plus when you have the upside, they're like, all right, now we're going to start putting them in with the ones. And this is going to be a real competition where they're going to be, sliding in and out. We're going to, get a 1-to-1 comparison about who's playing better, who operates better with their teammates, all of that. I still wouldn't be surprised if Hoffman is the week 1 starter, but I would say that the odds are getting more and more in BB's favor that he's not only going to be the week 1 starter, but, the starting center for the next half decade at least. I think we've talked about all of his positive attributes, his power, his ability to create movement, things that, Hoffman doesn't really do because he's not really the most powerful guy. And I think that BB's, his hand usage, his ability to anchor in pass protection, his ability to defend hands. He still has things he has to go. He's still a little bit, in the transition from snap to block isn't perfect. You saw against the Rams in practice yesterday, he had an issue with, I think it was it Tyler Davis or was it your boy Bobby Brown? But he got swimmed over his snap hand because he was a little bit slow and leaning when he's still struggling, in those center things because of how inexperienced he is in those situations, especially the most difficult thing a center can handle is a nose tackle who's shaded on him attacking his snap hand right after the snap. But those are things I think we've seen progress. The best thing that we can say about BB is that week over week and practice over practice, he looks better and better and better. And we have 3 weeks until week 1. I think by the time we reach week 1, you're going to start seeing BB definitively be the number 1 and better than Hoffman. I wouldn't say it's definitive. Like I said, there's still good. I wouldn't be surprised if Hoffman wins out, but I think BB's talent is really starting to take over, and that's just going to continue. It's just like a snowball rolling down a hill. It's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger and harder to stop.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Cooper Beebe, if you go based on Brock Hoffman's, combine weight and Cooper Beebe's combine weight, he outweighs him by about 12 to 15 pounds and is still a significantly better foot athlete, better as an athlete on the field and tested than what Brock Hoffman is. And it's just really hard. And when you talk about when he also has what's going on between the ears, and as that kind of develops, because Brock Hoffman technically has a 2-year NFL head start. This is going into year 3 for Brock Hoffman. So he's got a 2-year head start on BB from the protection standpoint and all that kind of stuff. If he's already catching him from that standpoint or already ahead of him from that standpoint, it becomes, and when he's out there dirting dudes in the preseason games, you really start to check the boxes of what is it that Brock Hoffman brings that Cooper Beebe's not already even or better, because he's not as good of an athlete. We've seen the snap reliability improve significantly from Cooper Beebe at the same time that it's degraded a little bit from Brock Hoffman. If Cooper Beebe's just as nasty and mean and kind of aggravated of a player on the field as Brock Hoffman is, then he doesn't have that for him. If he's got the mental stuff down and is moving ahead in that area, there's no reason for the offensive line coaches or anybody like that to put Brock Hoffman ahead of Cooper Beebe. And a lot of times the players can see this stuff, and especially when you've got a veteran in the room like Zach Martin. It used to be when you have a veteran room, because the Cowboys had Travis Frederick and Zach Martin and Tyron Smith, and they had but now you've got a legit Hall of Fame vet in the room who's in his last year or two. It's pretty hard to go to that guy and say, hey, we're going to put a lesser player next to you because we think we like him better.
And Zach Martin, people don't know this, but Zach Martin will make his feelings felt.
Yes.
If he feels something, that whole room will know. He's not someone who's going to stay quiet.
Yes,
We heard a lot of consternation in the past about the previous offensive line coaches.
Yep.
And a lot of that stemmed from Zach Martin. And
yes.
So that's not a bad thing. I think it was a good thing. I think the yo-yo effect that the Cowboys have done to this offensive line for the last almost decade, it seems like, where every 2 years
Now it
they'll
is,
have
yeah.
a new offensive line coach, and Zach Martin is someone who will let it be known when the new offense. I mean, I'll honestly say it. I don't think anybody's ever said that, but him is basically the main reason why Paul Alexander got the see you later mid-season. It's because the veterans led by Zach Martin did not like the techniques that he was implementing, and they made that known. It wasn't something that, maybe everybody on the outside, it didn't go to the outside, but everybody in that room knew 100% how Zach Martin and those veterans felt. So he's going to make it felt if he sees something, or he sees a player that shouldn't be playing, or they're doing a type of block that he doesn't think really fits, he'll let it known. And when Zach Martin says stuff, as we've seen, Zach Martin gets what he wants. Try to tell that man no. Good luck.
Yeah, and it's like we've seen Jason Witten, right? Like I'm trying to remember who it was. Was it Abe Elam that they signed in the offseason for vet minimum to come in and play safety when they were never playing safeties? I think Rob Ryan was the defensive coordinator, and he comes out in the first practice and runs an option route on him and dusts him and comes up, get this effing scrub off the field or something like that. Zach Martin's kind of that guy. He's kind of that way. Like he will say the competitiveness is at that tier, and the willingness to voice it and not just kind of say, all right, I'm going to be the company man and do whatever the coaches want. Like when you reach that level of competitiveness and that level of ability where you are the best in the world at what you do, and you also have that high level of competitiveness that says everybody else needs to be at this standard, that's a reason the Cowboys have had acceptable or better offensive line play every year for more than a decade now, is because they've had guys like that on their offensive line. And B, it makes everybody know that if something's not up to that standard, everybody around is going to know it, because I'm not scared to say this guy's not good enough. Get this guy off the field. And if you put a guy who's lesser on him, especially like I said, this is probably Zach Martin's last year with the Cowboys, maybe his last year in the league. He's going to say what he wants and what he believes, and it's going to be real hard for Solari or Mike McCarthy to look at Terrence Steele, who's been playing next to Zach Martin for 5 years now, or Tyler Smith, who has learned a ton from Zach Martin, or Tyler Guyton, who is probably looks up to Zach Martin a ton too, and say, no, we think Brock Hoffman needs to play, and we know better than Zach Martin knows. And the same. And it's going to be very clear very soon, I think, that Cooper Beebe is going to be the right option at center. And I think that it was clear from early on that there was the potential for that. I think they were just a little scared to dive straight into it, and I think they may have wanted to give they may have wanted to give Cooper a little bit of time before they stuck him next to Zach Martin and had the snap issues and the transition issues and all that kind of stuff, and had some of that pop up.
I think they were waiting for his center ability to get to a point to where it wouldn't disrupt the first team's flow in practice. Because at the beginning, he was having a lot of snap issues. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of thing that you really don't want to deal with your first team. You want them to be able to really have that flow, get in, be able to, work on the things that are necessary for the season. You don't want to have to, deal with little procedural things like that. So I think they were honestly just waiting for BB's, play to get to a, just a certain point. And once he's shown that he has the potential, but once they've shown that he's developing toward that potential, I think then that's when they're ready. Like, okay, we're going to bring this guy, put him in center. It's just a little bit later than all of us thought. We thought it should have been the week, immediately, why play around, just put him in at the center. But given the issues that he did have snapping the ball, I think this route is probably the best route that you could have had for BB and his development.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's, you don't want the first team offense to lose 2 out of 8 snaps in a goal line red zone run drill because of bad snaps from the center when you're in an inter-squad practice with the Rams. like what happened yesterday. It happened to be Brock Hoffman that it happened to, but yes. And yes, Dustin, having Brock Hoffman as your backup center is a fantastic situation to have. Brock Hoffman as your starting center gives you a lot of questions and worries. And really quick, playing, yes, absolutely. He has said as much multiple times that he does not. He loves what he does. He gets to work from a development standpoint and a technique standpoint and all that kind of stuff in a way that most offensive line coaches within buildings don't get to work. So many offensive line coaches are not technique development like player coaches. They are scheme coaches, run game designers, all that kind of stuff that happen to coach the offensive line. Duke doesn't want that job. Duke wants to coach technique, and he also gets to do the strength and conditioning side. He gets to do all the nutrition. He gets to do all that stuff he wouldn't have any way of touching. And I think he probably makes more money than what an offensive line coach. I mean, you could get an owner that just like way overpays an offensive line coach, like a lot of teams do for Bill Callahan and stuff like that right now. But you could get a team that pays way more than normal.
And he gets to do what he wants, He
exactly.
gets to do the things he wants. He gets to focus on the things he wants to focus on. He doesn't have to worry about, the head coach coming in and say, no, we're going to do it this way according to my philosophy.
Right.
All of these different things. He just gets to purely do what he wants. He makes good money. He gets to set his own clock, set his own schedule. If he doesn't want to get up at 5 a.m., he doesn't have to. If he doesn't want to work past, 5 p.m., he doesn't have to. He gets to set everything that he wants according to his lifestyle, what makes him happiest. And honestly, if I was in his situation, given the client list that he has, I would do the exact same thing.
And he's said it for years too, even before he was quite as prominent as he is now because of the notoriety that he's gotten for some of the work. Even before he was this notorious, he has said that for a long time.
Yeah, even back when he was working for LaCharles Bentley at the O-line Performance in Arizona.
Absolutely, yep. So we have another football game coming, John. This is the wonderful part of this time of year is that we don't have to spend 8 shows talking about what we're going to talk about. We have a football game coming up. What is it that we are looking towards? What is it that we're looking for specifically? Pick a player or two or a concept or two that we're looking for, an idea from the Cowboys offense or defense going into this matchup with the Raiders.
I think the biggest things are the things that we've talked about a lot today. The Hoffman-BB battle. I think that's going to be really exciting. I think it's going to be really interesting, seeing, game number 2 in that little battle, especially now that we're going to be able to see BB get some run with the first team. I think that's going to be really exciting to see how he works in combination with a Tyler Smith and a Zach Martin, because that's a lot different than working with, a TJ Bass and an Awesome Richards or a Earl Bostic, Josh Ball,
Yeah.
But so I think that's going to be very, very, very exciting. Again, the defense. The thing is, I don't know how much Jordan Phillips and Carl Lawson are going to factor into this preseason game. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't play a single snap. I honestly would expect that they don't play a single snap, given that they're just going to be getting here. Probably Friday. I wouldn't think that Carl Lawson or Jordan Phillips would be able to get to California by practice today. I think.
Yeah, probably not by practice for sure, but they may be in for meetings after practice or something. Especially Jordan Phillips, they got the trade news last night.
Yeah.
He may have been able to fly in kind of overnight, and with being on West Coast time for practice, he gained 3 hours by flying from LA from New York to LA. So
it's the best time.
Yeah, we'll see.
One thing I'm also interested to see is the kind of linebacker situation, because Damone Clark has been dealing, it seems like, with a leg issue. DeMarvion Overshawn had a hip pointer.
Your timing is perfect. Dustin asked the question, what's up with the Overshawn injury?
So those are the things that I'll be interested in. See Marist Luafau get some runs with the ones. That's going to be very interesting to get an early glimpse about him. I think even though he's been playing with the second and third team defenses, I think he's someone who's impressed, his ability to flow to the ball. I've been impressed with his willingness taking on linemen. He's not afraid for a lighter back. He's not afraid to stick his nose in there and take on these offensive tackles or offensive guards and look to shed these blocks, So I'm going to be interested looking to see how he looks there. But besides that, there's not really a ton. Obviously, the Trey Lance situation. If you have an extra hour and 10 minutes, any of you guys, go watch the QB school that JT O'Sullivan just did on Trey Lance.
I will say, I had some film. I had some film queued up from the game, and 3 or 4 of the plays that I had queued up showed up in the JT's show.
And he pointed out a lot of the things that you talked about.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, he talked about a lot of things that you talked about, the inconsistency in mechanics, the not identifying coverages, the throwing the ball to places where it just doesn't make sense given what coverage that they showed. Mm-hmm. And it just, I'm not the biggest quarterback guy. I'm not going to act like I'm a quarterback expert. I learn a ton from watching these JT O'Sullivan videos and seeing just the small nuances that he picks up and sees that I don't really see with my naked eye. Things that I would notice from like defensive linemen, offensive linemen, linebackers, like I can pick up on those nuances, but quarterbacks, I'm just not to that point in my quarterback study yet.
It's like a whole different sport, man. It's crazy.
And having, JT O'Sullivan, be able to mesh not only the mechanics, but also the scheme related stuff and how they combine into one in the decision-making process, and someone who's been in those situations, so he knows what decisions can be made and what can't, what is asking too much, what is asking too little. They're just extremely valuable. And I would say anybody that wants to learn more about the quarterback position as a whole, they are fantastic. Not even ones just on Trey Lance and them, on any of the quarterbacks. They are really, really must watch and fantastic to watch. But that Trey Lance one is rough. He is hammering Trey Lance for an hour 10. And basically the only good things he says were, that was a good scramble.
He did a good job, outside of structure, go make a play. It looks good, all that kind of stuff. But there is there's a lot to be. The thing is that there were 6 snaps that you watch in that game and you're like, okay, like I see it on these 6 snaps. Now, can he take these 6 snaps against the Rams and turn it into 15 snaps against the Raiders? Because if he can, then that's the right trajectory. That's the trajectory you want to be seeing. If he's not, then that becomes really tough, because he's
Taysom Hill, let's go.
Essentially, yeah. He essentially becomes a glorified running back, see if he can catch the ball kind of.
There's a team that, that John Reese Pumley or whatever, he was a quarterback, but he's been returning kicks for his team in the preseason.
Oh, there you go. That's a roll right there.
Okay. We got a roll for you, bucko, because that Fossil's going to be wanting to get wild with, throwbacks and stuff on this new kickoff. Throw Lance back there. Let's get crazy.
I will say one thing that gave me a lot of hope, and this is very niche right here, right? Yeah. Is that there was a couple of one that I can really remember, and JT highlighted it in his video. One of the read option wrap kind of escort lead plays that they ran was extremely well designed, and in a way that gives me hope that these guys are willing to, if they wind up in a situation where, because I think we both agree that, heaven forbid, I got some wood right here I'll knock on, something happens to Dak Prescott in week 2 and he's down for the whole rest of the season. I don't need to see Cooper Rush play 15 games for this team. Like, you need to see Trey Lance and get him, 300 pass attempts in a season and all that kind of stuff. It at least gives you a little bit of hope that they could actually lean heavy into some of the quarterback run stuff, and not just like, oh, we're going to run regular inside zone, but instead of just having it be regular inside zone, you're going to read the backside in, and if he crashes, you're going to run. Like, there's a lot more to a lot of the stuff they were doing to try to give him opportunities to show off what he could do. Even if they didn't do it a ton, the stuff that they did do was nuanced enough and creative enough to really give him a chance and give the offense a chance, even if they were having to do it more often in the game than they did.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where if Dak Prescott, gets nicked up and he misses a game or 2 or 3, you put Cooper Rush in there to kind of keep the season afloat. But if, like you said, Dak's he tears his ACL or fucks up his Achilles or something and he's out for the season definitively, I mean, throw Trey Lance in there and let's see what's going on, you know. Worst case scenario, he looks awful. Your season tanks and you get a good draft pick. At best, maybe he shows something and you can use him as trade bait, you know.
Yep. You can tag him and trade him.
Or if he signs somewhere else, you get a good compensatory pick for him. But like you said, if Dak Prescott's out for the season, no one wants to watch 14 games of Cooper Rush.
Right.
You know,
nobody needs to see that.
What's the point of having let's say, you know, they're 2-0, you know, Dak Prescott then is out for the next 15 games. What's the point of having Cooper Rush go 7-8, you know, and we
finish 9-8,
not going to make the playoffs, but not going to have a good pick. That doesn't help anybody.
Yep, absolutely.
You know, so,
absolutely.
But like you said, if you miss 2 or 3 games, put Rush in there, keep the season afloat, and then when Dak Prescott comes back, keep going. But
yeah, because they're both going to be here. They're both going to be here because the only shot you had of it only being one was for Trey Lance to come out in the preseason and just show out in a way that light it on fire. And then they would have the choice of, okay, do we trade Cooper Rush? Do we trade Trey Lance and keep the other one as the backup quarterback? The way it's gone, they can't have Trey Lance be the primary backup because if he has to play 2 or 3 games, they're probably going 0-2 or 0-3 in those 3 games, those 2 or 3 games. But it'll be interesting to see again. Can he take those 6 plays and turn them into 15? And then can he take those 15 and turn them into 25 or 30 in the 3rd preseason game? And now we feel like, okay, like maybe he can throw a strike to the flat when he needs to, and he's not going to miss back shoulder to the flat every single play and leave his guys out to dry. Because, again, some of the stuff was good. Some of the stuff, it just felt like he wasn't – it seemed like he hadn't played football in 4 years, which is kind of what has happened. And so it'll be interesting to see how he builds off the most reps he's gotten in years and how that turns into something for the next game against the Raiders. And I think really that's probably the biggest story. I think we kind of know what the offensive line is going to look like at this point, other than the Cooper Beebe, Brock Hoffman thing. We kind of know what the wide receivers are going to look like once CeeDee Lamb gets signed and shows up. We know what the tight end, like there's not that many questions on this team anymore outside of, you know, Trey Lance might be a big storyline just because of the trade and the name and all that kind of stuff.
Totally agree.
Absolutely. All right, guys, we're going to get out of here. Thanks so much if you joined us live. We appreciate it. We're excited. Carl Lawson is a Dallas Cowboy. We've been waiting for this day for 7 or 8 years.
Dreams do come true.
There you go. Never give up hope. That's the lesson, ladies and gentlemen. If you joined us live, awesome. Thanks so much. Below the video, please subscribe, like the video, you know, all that kind of stuff. Thanks for being in the chat with us, guys. Also, if you're watching this on replay, like the video, subscribe, leave a comment. We appreciate you guys for sure. If you own a small business, you're doing pretty well in your business. Maybe your accounting books are a mess. You've got some historical stuff that's a problem. Maybe your taxes are all jacked up. Let me know. Silver Moon Financial is my company. I can help you. We can get it straight. And we can get you on the right track there so you can have better insight in your business, make better decisions, so you can make more money. All right, guys, take care. Cowboys Raiders Saturday, right? Saturday afternoon?
Yep. It's unfortunate. Right during the UFC fights.
There you go. John's going to have to multi-screen it. There you go. There you go. Somebody asked what you were going to be watching, and I knew the answer. There it is. Keith asked, what are you going to watch? Both. There's, you know, capital B, capital O, capital A, capital F, both.
Yeah.
He'll be multi-screening it, I'm sure. But guys, thanks so much for joining us. We will be back on Tuesday to talk about the Raiders game, talk about all the stuff that comes out of it. You know, we'll have some film. We're going to try to get the technical stuff taken care of with the film so we can do that too. All right, guys, thanks so much. Have a great one. We will see you later.